Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have a story from Italy, and the title of this story is The Booby. An ignorant man who associates with clever people has always been more praised than a wise man who keeps the company of fools. For as much profit and fame as one may gain from the former, so much wealth and honor one may lose by the fault of the latter. And as the proof of the pudding is in the eating, you will know from the story which I am going to tell you whether my proposition be true. There was once a man who was as rich as the sea, but as there can never be any perfect happiness in this world, he had a son so idle and good for nothing that he could not tell a bean from a cucumber. So, being unable any longer to put up with his folly, he gave him a good handful of crowns and sent him to trade in the Levant, for he knew well that seeing various countries and mixing with diverse people awaken the genius and sharpen the judgment and make men expert. Moscione, for that was the name of the son, got on horseback and began his journey toward Venice, the arsenal of the wonders of the world, to embark on board some vessel bound for Cairo. And when he had traveled a good day's journey, he met with a person who was standing fixed at the foot of a poplar, to whom he said, "What is your name, my lad? Whence are you, and what is your trade?" And the lad replied, "My name is Lightning. I am from Arrowland, and I can run like the wind." "I should like to see a proof of it," said Moscione, and Lightning answered, "Wait a moment, and you will see whether it is dust or flour." When they had stood waiting a little while, a doe came bounding over the plain, and Lightning, letting her pass on some way, and to give her the more law, darted after her so rapidly and light of foot that he would have gone over a place covered with flour without leaving the mark of his shoe, and in 4 bounds he came up with her. Moscione, amazed at this exploit, asked if he would come and live with him, and promised to pay him royally. So Lightning consented, and they went on their way together. But they had not journeyed many miles when they met another youth, to whom Moscione said, "What is your name, comrade? What country are you from, and what is your trade?" "My name," replied the lad, "is Quick Ear. I am from Vale Curious, and when I put my ear to the ground, I hear all that is passing in the world without stirring from the spot. I perceive the monopolies and agreements of tradesmen to raise the prices of things, the ill offices of courtiers, the appointments of lovers, the plots of robbers, the reports of spies, the complaints of servants, the gossips of old women, and the oaths of sailors, so that no one has ever been able to discover so much as my ears can." "If that be true," said Moscione, "tell me what they are now saying at my home." So the lad put his ear to the ground and replied, "An old man is talking to his wife and saying, 'Praise be Sol and Leo, I have got rid from my sight of that fellow Moscione, that face of old-fashioned crockery, that nail in my heart. By traveling through the world he will at least become a man, and no longer be such a stupid ass, such a simpleton, such a lose-the-day fellow, such a—'" "Stop, stop," cried Moscione. "You tell the truth, and I believe you. So come along with me, for you have found the road to good luck." "Well and good," said the youth. So they all went on together and traveled 10 miles farther, when they met another man, to whom Moscione said, "What is your name, brave fellow? Where were you born, and what can you do in the world?" And the man answered, "My name is Shoot Straight. I am from Castle Aimwell, and I can shoot with a crossbow so point-blank as to hit a crab-apple in the middle." "I should like to see the proof," said Moscione. So the lad charged his crossbow, took aim, and made a pea leap from the top of a stone, whereupon Moscione took him also like the others into his company. And they travelled on another day's journey, till they came to some people who were building a large pier in the scorching heat of the sun, and who might well say, "Boy, put water to the wine, for my heart is burning." So Moscione had compassion on them, and said, "My masters, how is it you have the head to stand in this furnace, which is fit to roast a buffalo?" And one of them answered, Oh, we're as cool as a rose, for we have a young man here who blows upon us from behind in such a manner that it seems just as if the west wind were blowing. Let me see him, I pray, cried Moscione. So the mason called the lad, and Moscione said to him, Tell me, by the life of your father, what is your name, what country are you from, and what is your profession? And the lad replied, My name is Blowblast. I am from Windy Land, and I can make all the winds with my mouth. If you wish for a zephyr, I will breathe one that will send you in transports. If you wish for a squall, I will throw down houses. Seeing is believing, said Moscione. Whereupon Blowblast breathed at first quite gently, so that it seemed to be the wind that blows at Posillipo towards evening. Then, turning suddenly to some trees, he sent forth such a furious blast that it uprooted a row of oaks. When Moscione saw this, he took him for a companion, and, travelling on as far again, he met another lad, to whom he said, What is your name, if I may make so bold? Whence are you, if one may ask, and what is your trade, if it is a fair question? And the lad answered, My name is Strongback. I am from Valentio, and I have such strength that I can take a mountain on my back, and it seems to me only a feather. If that be the case, said Moscione, you deserve to be the king of the custom house, and you should be chosen for standard-bearer of the 1st of May. But I should like to see a proof of what you say. Then Strongback began to load himself with masses of rock, trunks of trees, and so many other weights that 1,000 large wagons could not have carried them, which, when Moscione saw, he agreed with the lad to join him. So they travelled on till they came to Fairflower, the king of which place had a daughter who ran like the wind, and could pass over the waving corn without bending an ear. And the king had issued a proclamation that whoever could overtake her in running should have her to wife, but whoever was left behind should lose his head. When Moscione arrived in this country and heard the proclamation, he went straight to the king, and offered to run with his daughter, making the wise agreement either to win the race or leave his noodle there. But in the morning he sent to inform the king that he was taken ill, and being unable to run himself, he would send another young man in his place. Come who will, said Ciantella, for that was the king's daughter. I care not a fig. It is all one to me. So, when the great square was filled with people come to see the race, insomuch that the men swarmed like ants, and the windows and roofs were all as full as an egg, Lightning came out and took his station at the top of the square, waiting for the signal. And lo, forth came Ciantella, dressed in a little gown tucked halfway up her legs, and in a neat and pretty little shoe with a single sole. Then they placed themselves shoulder to shoulder, and as soon as the tarantara and tutu of the trumpets were heard, off they darted, running at such a rate that their heels touched their shoulders, and in truth they seemed just like hares with the greyhounds after them, horses broken loose from the stable, or dogs with kettles tied to their tails. But Lightning, as he was both by name and nature, left the princess more than a hand's breadth behind him, and came first to the goal. Then you should have heard the buzzing and shouting, the cries and the uproar, the whistling and clapping of hands of all the people, bawling out, "Hurrah! Long life to the stranger!" Whereas Ciantella's face turned as red as a schoolboy's who was going to be whipped, and she stood lost in shame and confusion and seeing herself vanquished. But as there were 2 heats to the race, she fell to planning how to be revenged for this affront. And going home, she put a charm into a ring of such power that if anyone had it upon his finger, his legs would totter so that he would not be able to walk, much less run. Then she sent it as a present to Lightning, begging him to wear it on his finger for the love of her. Quick Ear, who heard this trick plotted between the father and daughter, said nothing, and waited to see the upshot of the affair. And when, at the trumpeting of the birds, the sun whipped on the knight, who sat mounted on the jackass of the shades, they returned to the field, where at the usual signal they fell to plying their heels. But if Ciantella was like another Atalanta, Lightning had become no less like an old donkey and a foundering horse, for he could not stir a step. But Shoot Straight, who saw his comrade's danger, and heard from Quick Ear how matters stood, laid hold of his crossbow and shot a bolt so exactly that it hit Lightning's finger, and out flew the stone from the ring in which the virtue of the charm lay, whereupon his legs that had been tied were set free, and with 4 goat leaps he passed Storyteller and won the race. The king, seeing this victory of a blockhead, the palm thus carried off by a simpleton, the triumph of a fool, bethought himself seriously whether or not he should give him his daughter, and taking counsel with the wiseacres of his court, they replied that Storyteller was not a mouthful of the tooth of such a miserable dog and lose-the-day bird, and that, without breaking his word, he might commute the promise of his daughter for a gift of crowns, which would be more to the taste of a poor beggar like Moscione than all the women in the world. This advice pleased the king, and he asked Moscione how much money he would take instead of the wife who had been promised to him. Then Moscione, after consulting the others, answered, "It will take as much gold and silver as one of my comrades can carry on his back." The king consented, whereupon they brought Strongback, on whom they began to load bales of ducats, sacks of patacas, large purses full of crowns, barrels of copper money, chests full of chains and rings. But the more they loaded, the firmer he stood, just like a tower, so that the treasury, banks, usuries, and the money dealers of the city did not suffice, and he sent to all the great people in every direction to borrow their silver candlesticks, basins, jugs, plates, trays, and baskets. And yet all was not enough to make up the full load. At length they went away, not laden, but tired and satisfied. When the councillors saw what heaps and stores these 6 miserable dogs were carrying off, they said to the king that it was a great piece of assery to load them with all the sinews of his kingdom, and that it would be well to send people after them to lessen the load of that Atlas who was carrying on his shoulders a heaven of treasure. The king gave ear to this advice, and immediately dispatched a party of armed men, foot and horse, to overtake Moscione and his friends. But Quick Ear, who had heard this counsel, informed his comrades, and while the dust was rising to the sky from the trampling of those who were coming to unload the rich cargo, Blowblast, seeing that things were coming to a bad pass, began to blow at such a rate that he not only made the enemies fall flat on the ground, but he sent them flying for more than a mile distant, as the north wind does the folks who pass through that country. So, without meeting any more hindrance, Moscione arrived at his father's house, where he shared the booty with his companions, since, as the saying goes, a good deed deserves a good meed. So he sent them away content and happy. But he stayed with his father, rich beyond measure, and saw himself a simpleton laden with gold, not giving the lie to the saying, "Heaven sent biscuits to him who has no teeth."
Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.